From Manila to the globe, this is World Newsfeed, bringing you the biggest stories shaping our times. Good morning, I'm Raine Musñgi. Let's dive into the headlines making a global impact. South Korean President Yoon said he would move to lift a martial law declaration he had imposed just hours before, honoring a parliamentary vote against the measure. Yoon declared martial law on Tuesday to thwart anti-state forces among his opponents. But outraged lawmakers rejected the decree.
After the National Assembly's demand to lift martial law troops have been withdrawn. I will accept the National Assembly's demand and lift martial law through a cabinet meeting. After the National Assembly's demand to lift martial law troops have been withdrawn. I will accept the National Assembly's demand and lift martial law through a cabinet meeting. After the National Assembly's demand to lift martial law troops have been withdrawn. I will accept the National Assembly's demand and lift martial law through a cabinet meeting.
Yoon's surprise declaration, which he cast as aimed at his political foes, was unanimously voted down by 190 lawmakers in Parliament.
In accordance with the National Assembly's decision, the President must immediately lift martial law. The declaration of martial law is now invalid.
Under South Korean law, the president must immediately lift martial law if parliament demands it by a majority vote. His own party urged him to lift the decree, his declaration vocally opposed by the Speaker of Parliament and even the leader of Yoon's own party, Han Dong-hoon, who has clashed with the president over his handling of recent scandals. Now, as martial law was declared Tuesday night, South Korean soldiers could be seen entering the parliament building in Seoul through smashed windows. Live television footage had showed helmeted troops apparently tasked with imposing martial law attempting to enter the National Assembly building. Parliamentary aides were seen trying to push the soldiers back by spraying the extinguishers. Protesters had gathered outside Parliament in the country's biggest political crisis in decades. It is a crisis in the country that has been a democracy since the 1980s and is a U.S. ally and major Asian economy, and it caused international alarm. Well, the United States says it was watching developments in U.S. ally South Korea with grave concern. U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel added he had every hope and expectation that any political disputes would be resolved peacefully and in accordance with the rule of law.
We are watching the recent developments in the ROK with grave concern. We are seeking to engage with our Republic of Korea counterparts at every level, both here in the United States and in Seoul. The Secretary has been briefed, and we're keeping him appraised of the developments as well as monitoring closely what's happening on the ground. Let me also just mention that our alliance with the Republic of Korea is ironclad, and we're fully committed to that. And ultimately here, our hope is, and every hope and expectation is, that any political disputes will be resolved peacefully and in accordance with the rule of law.
Well, the surprise declaration of martial law by South Korean President Yoon was an extreme move, most likely motivated by his frustration at political gridlock. An analyst told Reuters on Tuesday Yoon is an inexperienced politician who has been at loggerheads with the opposition-controlled parliament. Professor Celeste Arrington of the George Washington University said the declaration of martial law was clearly inappropriate under the South Korean constitution. Koreans are already concerned about the potential instability or unpredictability of the incoming administration of Donald Trump in the U.S., and the current crisis will only amplify those concerns. Arrington expects an impeachment process to begin soon, and as of the latest reports, Yoon is facing calls for his resignation.
In the Constitution, you can only declare martial law if in extreme cases of national emergency or, like wartime or an incident or military need. And so this clearly is not a context that fits those criteria. I think a lot of Koreans have been concerned about the potential instability or unpredictability of Trump 2.0, and add to that the unpredictability and instability which we're now seeing unfold in Seoul, and I don't think that that is going to make it easy for policymakers and alliance managers. It also is now partnered with, in Tokyo, a relatively weak prime minister whose party is not in charge in the Diet. So we have now these three key allies who have forged a close trilateral cooperation over the last year and a half, facing politically uncertain times. And I think that opens the door to potential North Korean and or Chinese and Russian moves to destabilize the region, and that would negatively affect U.S. interests in the region. I think probably we're headed towards an impeachment process, which the National Assembly would have to vote on, and the numbers are against the president's favor in the National Assembly because it's not controlled by his party. And then the Constitutional Court would have to uphold that impeachment.
On to another political crisis in France this time. French Prime Minister Michel Barnier rejected the idea that President Emmanuel Macron should resign to unblock the country's political crisis. Barnier called Macron the guarantor of stability. In a primetime TV interview ahead of a no-confidence vote Wednesday night in Manila, Barnier said he remained open to the budget talks with the far-right National Rally and other parties. French lawmakers will vote on Wednesday on no-confidence motions, which are all but certain to oust the fragile coalition of Barnier, deepening the political crisis in the Eurozone's second-largest economy. Macron is set to return to France from a state visit to Saudi Arabia during the day. Barring any last-minute surprise, Barnier's will be the first French government to be forced out by a no-confidence vote in more than 60 years, at a time when the country is struggling to tame a massive budget deficit. In Riyadh, French President Emmanuel Macron called for the establishment of a global new water coalition. Speaking during the One Water Summit on the sidelines of the COP16 in Riyadh, Macron said that the coalition formed by Saudi Arabia, Kazakhstan, and France, alongside the World Bank, would have the responsibility to mobilize resources to fight water scarcity and other water-related issues across the world. Macron was joined on stage by Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who highlighted the coincidence of the event with the UN summit focused on fighting desertification and aiming to reduce land degradation and drought. Quantifying the cost for the first time, the United Nations says restoring the world's degraded land and holding back its deserts will require at least $2.6 trillion in investment by the end of the decade.
We have implemented a national plan to reduce our consumption by 10% by 2030, which is based on science, climate models to anticipate all scenarios, including the most degraded, and to mobilize all levers, sobriety, innovation, technology to serve all sectors. And we are continuing this action at the international level through the French Development Agency, which has already committed more than $10 billion to the water sector, including nearly $2 billion in 2023 alone. So, on a global scale, there are several projects that are being brought forward, and I would like to very quickly cover the 5 main ones in my view.
Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said the kingdom has financed more than 200 development projects in the water sector, amounting to more than $6 billion across 60 developing nations. The summit serves as a preparatory platform for the UN Water Conference in 2026. top emitter, China, told the top UN court on Tuesday that the existing United Nations climate treaties, such as the Paris Agreement, should be the framework used to look at what state obligations on climate change could be. This comes as the International Court of Justice, or ICJ, is expected to deliver a non-binding advisory opinion in 2025, countries' legal responsibility for the negative impact of climate change. One of those nations, Vanuatu, on Monday asked the court to recognize the harms climate change had caused and order reparations for its consequences. Beijing says that while it understands the challenges of developing countries in confronting climate change, existing UN treaties should provide the basis for its advisory opinion on states' legal obligations to fight global warming and address the consequences of their historic contributions to it.
China also hopes that the court will uphold the UN climate change negotiations mechanism as primary channel for global climate governance. Unlike conventional environmental pollution, the effects from GHG emission are global and historical, make it difficult to identify specific sources, establish causation, or attribute responsibility. Accordingly, the legal rules governing environmental pollution do not apply. Adverse effects from anthropogenic GHG emissions are in a sui generis legal status. The court is respectfully urged to leave this matter to be determined through scientific research and state practice or international lawmaking. GHG emissions do not constitute internationally wrongful act under general international law. The resulting loss and damage cannot be addressed through state responsibility or liability regime.
Now, while advisory opinions from the ICJ, often called the World Court, are not binding, they are legally and politically significant. Experts say its eventual opinion on climate change will probably be cited in climate change-driven lawsuits in courts from Europe to Latin America and beyond. Now, in an interesting development, scientists have found a potential reason for the changing climate. A recent study shows the Earth shifted a little bit on its axis, literally. Geophysicist Ki Won-so explains rampant global groundwater pumping has caused the planet to tilt 31.5 inches. The redistribution of groundwater has caused the drift of the rotational pole. His study, covering data from 1993 to 2010, highlights behaviors around rising sea levels. He also added the study poses the need to manage human needs and environmental conservation to protect the planet's delicate balance. A NASA scientist explained, and while the shift does not directly affect seasons, it poses potential implications on climate patterns. When we come back, an update from the Middle East crisis, plus news on FIFA World Cup and Olympics. That's next on your World Newsfeed. Welcome back to World Newsfeed. Israel threatened on Tuesday to return to war in Lebanon if its truce with Hezbollah collapses, and said this time its attacks would go deeper and target the Lebanese state itself after the deadliest days since a ceasefire was agreed on last week. In its strongest threat since the truce was agreed to end 14 months of war with Hezbollah, Israel said it would hold Lebanon responsible for failing to disarm militants who violate the ceasefire. Despite last week's truce, Israeli forces have continued strikes against what they say are Hezbollah fighters, ignoring the agreement to halt attacks and withdraw beyond the Litani River. On Monday, Hezbollah shelled an Israeli military post, while Lebanese authorities said at least 12 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes in Lebanon. Another person was killed on Tuesday by a drone strike.
We are constantly watching events in Syria. We are determined to defend the vital interests of Israel and to maintain the achievements of war.
Meantime, Israeli leaders hailed on Tuesday a pledge by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump that there would be hell to pay in the Middle East unless hostages held in the Gaza Strip were released ahead of his January 20th inauguration. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his ministers, and families of the missing hostages publicly thanked Trump for his hard-hitting words. They said Trump's statement had made clear to everyone who was in the right and who was wrong.
I want to thank President Trump for his strong statement yesterday about the need for Hamas to release the hostages, the responsibility of Hamas, and this adds another force to our continuing effort to release all the hostages. Thank you, President Trump.
Responding to Trump's post, senior Hamas official Bassem Naim said Netanyahu had sabotaged all efforts to secure a deal that involved exchanging the hostages for Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli prisons. Hundreds of thousands of Gazans who have had to flee their house because of fighting and desperate for the war to end were hoping for a breakthrough. But some Gazans say it seems Trump is in complete agreement with the Israeli administration and that there are apparently more punitive measures ahead. Israeli military strikes killed at least 23 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip on Tuesday, most of them in the town of Beit Lahia on the northern edge. And medics say as the army issued new evacuation orders in the south of the small enclave. The army also says it is targeting regrouping Hamas-led militants who often use civilian buildings, including schools and hospitals, for operational cover. Hamas denies this, accusing Israeli forces of indiscriminate bombardments. The United States urged Israel to investigate allegations its airstrikes have killed aid workers in Gaza. U.S. State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel said, expressing outrage over the killing of the Save the Children staffer. Now, asked about the killing of the 39-year-old Ahmad Faisal Islim al-Qadi in an airstrike Saturday, Patel said Washington was seeking more information about the death.
We condemn the intentional killing of aid workers anywhere. Humanitarian workers must be protected so they can safely deliver aid, whether it be in Gaza or whether it be truly anywhere in the world. And as I said, the IDF needs to provide additional information about this incident. We urge Israel to thoroughly and transparently investigate actions like these and take appropriate action in their system.
Former United States women's national team coach Jill Ellis has been appointed to the new position of FIFA's Chief Football Officer, that's CFO. She's tasked with driving the development and implementation of the world governing body's global football strategy. Ellis, who led FIFA's technical study group at the 2023 Women's World Cup, helped the U.S. become world champions in 2015 and 2019. The 58-year-old Ellis stepped down from her position as president of the National Women's Soccer League side San Diego Wave, which she had held since 2021. In a statement, FIFA says the creation of the Chief Football Officer position shows FIFA's commitment to creating a diverse, inclusive, and accessible global football community and give every talent, both boys and girls, a chance. Ellis says she's honored to be given this pioneering role to help unite communities and share the transformative power of football. The International Olympic Committee says the 2034 Soccer World Cup in Saudi Arabia is unlikely to clash with the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics. Saudi Arabia is the lone bidder for the 2034 World Cup, with global soccer body FIFA to vote on it next week. Due to Saudi's desert climate, the 2034 World Cup is very likely to be pushed to a winter slot, just as FIFA did with the 2022 edition in neighboring Qatar, which held the event from late November to mid-December. The IOC, however, has no concerns over a potential clash with the Salt Lake City Winter Games to be held from February 10th to 26th also in 2034.
This is going to be for sports fan a real feast during a period of whatever it is, 3-4 months, where you're going to have these two events. I think that the risk of having those two in parallel is immensely limited. Immensely limited. What I know as well is that with these two being in totally different countries and continent, from all standpoint, including a commercial one, we have actually virtually no risk. So what I see is a lot of sports consumption for all of us on any platform, on any channels. So really, we don't see at this stage a major issue. On the contrary, it's a lot of sport in the time frame.
Meanwhile, construction of a new sliding center for the 2026 Milano Cortina Winter Olympics is on track despite a tight schedule, with athletes set to test the venue for the first time in March. On to entertainment news now. Here's a new collab alert. K-pop group Twice teases a song with American female rapper Megan Thee Stallion. The highly anticipated iconic collaboration will be released on December 6th, Friday. Titled Strategy, the track will be the first off their upcoming mini album of the same title. Megan previously collaborated with Twice in the remix of her hit song Mamushi. Twice was last in the Philippines in June, where they met with Philo Onces in a fan meet. Finally, behind a regular white door of a house in the northwestern German town of Rinten hides a sparkling, colorful, and record-breaking Christmas spectacle. The Chiroman family set the world record for the largest number of decorated Christmas trees in one place, with 605 trees, as confirmed by the Record Institute for Germany, and with 120,000 ornaments, 50,000 lights, and thousands more Christmas figurines. The place is bursting with sparkle and color. The trees fill almost the entire house, including the bathroom, but there are two rooms that are off limits, the bedroom and their daughter's room. The Jeroman family had already broken the same record 6 times in the past. Last year, the number that earned them the record was 555 trees. The couple were intrigued to see what else is possible.
Because that's just awesome. It's totally amazing. I think it's really great when all the stuff is standing around here, glittering and shining. And then everyone who visits.
Yes, there's nothing to add. It's simply beautiful. It's nice when it all lights up and terrible when it turns off again.
That's all for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Catch up with us again tomorrow at 10 when we bring you the world in 30 minutes only on World Newsfeed. Follow the money comes next. Keep it here on the Bilyonaryo News channel, always on top.